you very much, Ryan. Good morning. I hope you're all feeling a bit better than I am. Well, we're the first act to follow Fred Swaneka's really powerful address last night. I thought the messages that we, as Community Conservation Fund Africa, took away from that were important, and I'm sure you guys feel the same. I thought one of the things that stuck in my mind was wildlife conservation is a business, and it has to be a business, and it has to make money for the people involved. But firstly, let me introduce you to, as I said yesterday, one thing, Jeremy Locke said to me that I undersold CCFA in our little mini presentation yesterday. Well, we're going to big it up today. Firstly, I'd like all of the community people that we've brought to the Conservation Lab. Can you guys stand up? Everybody, come on. The whole CCFA mob. Oh, come on, quickly. That's it. There you go. Here they are. Take a good look at them. And I urge you, over the next 36 hours or however long we've got here, talk to these people. They're the heart and soul of conservation. We're very proud to bring them here. As I said last night, and I said again very briefly, we've got a group of people who are pretty formidable. We've got community leaders, we've got academics, and we've got conservationists, a gang of people that I'm very proud to be associated with. Right, first question. Hands up all of you who have heard the name Cecil the Lion. Please, hands up. Has anybody not heard of Cecil the Lion? Would you put your hand up? Nobody. Right. Do you know that in the same week that Cecil the Lion was hunted and shot, an incident took place in the community just on the edge of Hwange National Park. A mother was with her two daughters, her little sort of 12-year-old daughter and a little 4-year-old daughter, and she sent the older daughter across to an adjoining hut to fetch a cooking utensil. The little girl wanted to go, the little 4-year-old wanted to go, the 12-year-old put her on her back, and off they went from the hut across a little bit of open veldt, and as they were crossing it, a male lion attacked them, ripped the 4-year-old child off her sister's back, killed her, and ate her in front of her distraught family. Do any of you know the name of that 4-year-old child? Have any of you even heard of that incident? One person's heard of the incident, but none of you know. It's funny, isn't it? We all know who Cecil the Lion is, and we have no idea who the human beings who live among these wild animals are or the problems they face. The point here is that the people who live in rural Africa side by side with the wild animals are largely overlooked by Western animal rights activists. Their lives are not even considered, thought of, or discussed when these Western activists rise up on a tide of social media and declare their outrage at this or that atrocity committed against an animal. And yet, these rural Africans are the community, the people that our organization, Community Conservation Fund Africa, has chosen to work with and to ally ourselves with. Community leaders have, for the past few years, felt that the luxury safari industry has been paying lip service to community engagement. The trinket shops in safari lodges and guided tours of village handicrafts and villages do not add up to commitment to community conservation. The purpose of the Conservation Lab, as I'm sure you all know, is to build a stronger bridge between the travel industry and conservation. So the travel agent, the tour operator, the lodge owner will be able to leave the conference and say, this is what I need to be doing with my business to contribute to conservation. So it's our intention to bring the issues facing rural African communities that are living with 70% of the continent's wild animals to the Conservation Lab delegates. 70% of wild animals live outside parks. They live among rural people. That way, the luxury travel industry can understand the real issues on the ground and respond accordingly. And what is required are processes to incentivize communities to live alongside thriving populations of large, dangerous animals and to reap the benefits of life in those wild lands. The problem is that the biggest competitor for that land is agriculture, and the biggest threat to wilderness is insecure land rights and conversion to agriculture. You'll hear a lot about that this morning. And I really want you... Serge often accuses me of boring everybody to tears with all this worthy stuff. Please don't be bored. Please listen very carefully, because these guys have got something to say. So you really need to engage with communities that are directly affected by your industry. And unless those communities are able to benefit, you will be setting up a competition between people and wildlife, in which both will lose. So our first panel today, the subject is just this. It's community conservation. Is it lip service, or is the travel industry paying as much as it can afford, contributing as much as it can afford to communities? I'll get the panel up, and I just want to do a little preamble. So I'll introduce you to Tony Adams, who's the Sustainability Director at andBeyond. Tony, will you come up? Is he here? Herding cats, conservationists. Masego Madzwamuse is the CEO of Southern African Trust. Masego, take seats. Yeah, clap. Give him a round of applause. Adrian Gardiner, who is chairman of the Mantis Collection and is our CCFA board chairman. And Dr. Lamson Maluleke from the Maluleke community in Limpopo province, right up in the north of Kruger. Take your seats, guys. Lamson's on his way. So while Lamson makes his way to the stage, let me say a few things here. God, that Merlot was heavy last night. Botswana's new president, Madzwamuse, recently said, and I quote here, "I have expressed my bitter opposition to a tourism policy that yields exotic ostentatiousness on one hand, and right next to it you see a barefooted, malnourished black child. That is reprehensible." I think this statement reflects the pent-up frustration that's been boiling for some time. Communities have been ignored, and African leaders are now obliged to address this issue. There is a feeling of enough is enough. The future of the luxury travel industry's ability to operate in countries like Botswana, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and even South Africa will thus be determined by whether or not you will be able to talk to the broad political and social economies of those countries. African leaders are saying you must adapt your business model or they will find an alternative land use. So what we are asking is whether the tourist industry is willing and able to face this considerable responsibility. Industry experts argue that profit margins are tight in the luxury safari business, and the economic reality of operating in such remote parts of Africa means the responsibilities for community upliftment lie beyond the industry. That the economic reality is that the travel industry is contributing as much as it can, and that maybe it is not the industry's responsibility to tend to the well-being of these rural communities and underwrite the risks associated with population growth and climate change. We shall also address another significant question, whether or not the travel industry's so-called commitment to rural communities is real, or whether it's simply a convenient marketing tool that does not really address the profoundly deep socio-economic issues that are raised by President Masisi. So let's get to our panel. We've got 15, 20 minutes, I think 15 minutes, to discuss this issue. I want to start with Tony. andBeyond, as you know, has got a reputation. There are mics there. andBeyond has a reputation of being engaged with communities, a lot of its lodges. Is this a matter of small margins? Can the travel industry afford to invest more in community conservation?
Graham, to answer that question, I think it's really not a question of can we afford it. That is one element, but the other element is can we not afford it? Because the threat is consistently there from the communities. there are various ways of engaging, whether you have the financial means or don't have the financial means. I mean, we in the tourism industry, we do get a lot of guests coming through from various parts of the world. Our business model is to reach out to the guests at the sort of top end of the market. And by exposing these guests to various elements, a lot of them would like to contribute and would like to become part of. So that's a financial means of answering some of that. I think there are a lot of people who also would like to have a means. They have their will, but they don't have the means or the outlet to facilitate their funding through to the communities. From a company perspective, yes, definitely. The margins are always tight, and we do find that things fluctuate. So you'll have good seasons and bad seasons. I think the real risk is that you can't switch on community engagement and switch off community engagement based around finances. You have to balance the model with some form of setting up an external or alternatively a means of financially enabling the community engagement on a consistent basis.
Let me ask Adrian, is this something, should national governments be more involved in paying for community upkeep, or is it a relationship between the travel industry and the communities?
I think, Graham, I'd just like to use an example. Our group has been working in Rwanda, and I know Rwanda was profiled quite a lot yesterday, for the past 12 years. When I first went there, the cost to see a gorilla was $365. Today it's $1,500. Now the reason for that is that a large percentage of what is taken to go and see that gorilla goes to the community. So you'll be absolutely certain that not one gorilla has ever been lost to any form of poaching or whatever. So I consider that to be quite a prime example. Another example of which you and I are involved in the CCFA is that we provided $150,000 to African parks to replace fish in the lake at Akagera. Now that's already happened, and that the community, 120 families around that lake, are already participating. They're starting to harvest, not only for themselves, but to sell to other people. So there's two examples of where community involvement is and will certainly be maintained. But I think that if we don't involve communities, I think the whole industry that most of us are involved in, and I heard yesterday, and I must congratulate the board of the Conservation Lab who put yesterday together, because there were some very interesting topics that came about there. We heard Colin say, is tourism involved enough or not? And they're not. And I just want to give you an example of why we are now involved with an international group. And I think it's public knowledge that Accor Hotels, with 4,500 hotels around the world, with a loyalty member of in excess of 100 million, have bought 50% of our brand and our management company. Now, I did that for three reasons. The first reason being that we didn't have a proper distribution system. The second thing, we didn't have a loyalty program. And the third reason, which was a make or break reason, was that I said to them that the hospitality industry, and if we have to lead by example in Africa, needs to be the leader. Now, how can we do that? If they have a membership in their loyalty program of 100 million people, my first question to Sebastian, the chairman of Accor, is, can I get $1 a person? You know, that's $100 million. And now there's a way to do that, is burn the points. And we all run royalty programs. So if I wrote to you, Graham, and said to you, would you burn X number of points to a program? So this is a program that's been set up by us in the hospitality industry that's open to everybody. Yeah. The CCFA is not a closed book to Mantis and Accor. It's for everybody. And I'll just finish this little summary up by saying, without wildlife in Africa, what have we got? Yesterday, people stood up here and said, our prime asset is the wildlife that we've got, that there's nowhere else in the world. I've been to Nigeria, nothing left, not one tourist. We're involved in Gambia, only for the beach. Senegal wants us there. All these countries have now realized, and there's a big conference, as you know, at the Victoria Falls soon, that if we don't save our wildlife, and there's only one way to save it, is through community involvement. So I endorse exactly what you said. We have to get the community involved. If we don't get them involved, goodbye.
Yep.
Because you can't live on the fence one side and get nothing from it.
Okay, let me put the question to Masego. You're outside the tourism industry. There's a mic. Is the tourism industry doing enough for communities as your spokesperson for NRM?
I would say not enough. You cited a statistic where you started off and said 70% of the wildlife population is actually found outside of protected areas. And outside of those protected areas is actually people and communities. Those also happen to be the pockets of the deepest levels of poverty in the region or in the continent. I think the levels of inequality and poverty that we see outside of the protected areas, in the areas where the tourism sector operates, are not good for business. They're not good for the social license to operate, and we should be honoring the custodians and the stewards of conservation, which are those communities. I don't think we're doing enough of that. We see the honoring of communities, the narrative we have a dual narrative. A narrative that perhaps celebrates the cultural aspects, the artifacts that those communities have, but not the sense of being and the human beings that are at the center of that location. The one thing that really needs to shift is a narrative that looks at communities as potential partners and not the enemy of the sector. We shouldn't be looking at communities as the sources of poaching, but people who can contribute to the sector if they're able to see meaningful benefits from the tourism industry. How do we shift that? If we're to look at what the tourism sector gives back, are we giving back to sectors and activities that are truly transformational in nature? Are we giving back to, say, the education sector? And is it possible for the tourism sector to actually look at how you change the future of a generation one initiative at a time? The kinds of investments that we could be making into early child education, truly how much would that cost to contribute to an ECDE center that makes it possible for a woman who must provide for her family to free up her time from the burden of having to provide and care for the family towards more economic, productive activities. Right. I think we need to look at where we're making a contribution.
I want to come back to you all. I'd like to direct a question at Lamson first, but I'd also like to do a quick round robin. We're short of time. We started very late. You all turned up late. And so I'm very aware of time constraints. But I want to do a quick round robin at the end of this and to ask each of you in 2 sentences to tell this community of obviously concerned tourism people what they can do to make a greater contribution to the communities that they're going to operate with. But first, let me ask Dr. Maluleke. Colin Bell was one of the instigators, creators of the lodge in the northern part of Kruger, the Maluleke. I can't remember what the lodge was called. It was a wilderness creation. Tell us what happened next, because that seemed like a really good model of community and tourism industry coming together. What happened to the lodge? And what happened to wilderness?
Yeah, I think maybe let me start by saying that looking at the benefit that, or how could the community benefit out of conservation or tourism-based conservation, I will look at in 2 dimensions. The first one is tourism outside the protected area. Community outside the protected areas, and communities inside. So inside and outside. I'll give 1 or 2 scenarios. There's a community outside Punda Maria Gate of Kruger National Park, just up north, called Matian. They have been there, but they are very close to Kruger National Park. Actually, they are bordered by the fence. but I cannot tell you the extent to which they are benefiting outside Kruger. So if you want to talk about community benefiting from conservation-based tourism outside, it's very minimal. And how could the community, what is the difference between the Matiani community and Maluleke? Because Maluleke is inside.
Yeah.
So this dimension of saying that those who are waving for tourism going to the national parks will benefit out of that, I think we're deceiving ourselves. But let me come to your question. Yes, the Maluleke community have been in partnership with World and Safaris then, though they decided to leave the area.
Wilderness decided to leave.
They have decided in a very good spirit. And I can tell you that, but the industry is going on, the business is going on, but those, because there are those who bought the lodge and they are running the lodge.
So the lodge is still operating?
The lodge is still operating.
Under different ownership?
Sorry?
Under different ownership?
Yeah, different ownership.
And the community is still benefiting from the existence of the lodge or not?
Is still benefiting out of that. Mm-hmm. But let me segment the benefit. You see, the problem is that we are coming to this industry from the poverty level. And we are joining in partnership with people who have got capital. And if you come in, even if you are inside, if you come in, not bring a capital, the only thing that you will get is what is job opportunity, which is very good, because most of the people who have been employed in that area have never been working elsewhere. So for them, it was their first job opportunity. And most of these are still there. Yes, it's fine. But if you go beyond that, look at a situation where you also have an opportunity to bring a capital, an equity in the industry, you will benefit more. Because if you don't bring any capital, you only benefit from rental and job opportunity, as I've said. Yeah. But if you bring a capital, you are benefit because you have got a share in the business and also benefiting from renting the area or leasing the area and also benefiting from the job opportunity. I would say a half of bread is better than nothing. And I think that's where we are coming from.
What, you've got half bread?
Now we have got just a quarter bread we are going towards.
Yeah.
But we are going there.
Okay, well, so in the right direction. I'm very, very conscious of time. So I now want, if we can, we'll start with you, Masego. Tell these people in 2 sentences what they can do to benefit the communities that you talk to. Yeah. In 2 sentences.
In 2 sentences, that's going to be really
that's
going to be really hard. I think it does start with meaningful partnerships. And Lamson said something about when you come from poverty and you've got very little to give in a space where you're negotiating with capital. I actually think we need to shift that. The communities have a lot to give. The first being their very land that the operations are taking part in, the land rights. They might not be recognized by the state, by the legal system, but if we were to honor the customary tenure systems and to honor the history that the people have with that piece of land, we would be having a very different conversation.
Okay, that's your 2 sentences.
It's the rights, the land rights, but I also think that the partnerships have to be really tangible. And they have to yield tangible benefits for the communities.
Yeah. Tony?
I think I'm going to come more from operational space, and that's more around buy local. You know, set up if you are commercially operating, set up businesses or enable businesses external by the communities of your stakeholders, really, and set up commercial businesses that allow for that. I think this is also a question of working with the communities. Find out what are their requirements first. Engage the youth. That's one of the biggest threats that are coming. So If one does that, if one takes those kind of actions, you're already on a path to some form of engagement that will enable those communities. If there's a great economy external to the reserve, they will fundamentally look after the reserve because that's the basis of their economy. Right. Not easy to do, though, but very much so.
That's another 2 sentences too long. Two sentences from you, Adrian, will be a miracle.
You're lucky there's a people, ladies in the audience.
What do they do? What do these people
Graham,
do?
I just want to give you a couple of examples. We were the first to be given community land at the Umfolozi Game Reserve, some 6,000 hectares. We've built 2 lodges there. The park has incorporated us with it. We employ communities, we train communities, we give funds from every guest that comes in to the community for programs which we run. So there's a great example of embracing communities. Number 2 is that there's a little village around Shamwari and all the game reserves called Allisdale. I'm begging the Eastern Cape government to open that up into an education centre where we can train the community people who are all around there. All of us give money toward it, that it becomes an education centre. Number 3, and nobody's addressed it, 50 years ago when I was at university in marketing here, and the whole of the marketing lecture says we have to address overpopulation. If we don't address overpopulation, and please could they put it on the agenda for the next meeting, we've got a crisis in this world, we will exterminate ourselves. It'll definitely be the 6th or 7th mass extinction.
Right.
3 sentences, sorry.
No, that's okay. You remember this. Educate, don't fornicate. Next.
Yeah. I like that.
Lamson, you've got 2 sentences,
Okay.
and we really have to move this up because we've got 2 really, really brilliant presentations.
Good.
Huh? 2 sentences.
I think let me reconfirm the issue of the real partnership, the kind of business model that I believe will take community from being a survivalist, from the peripheral of this in this industry, to be part of the mainstream economy. It's a kind of business model, and I think need to be redefined. Secondly, is the question of when we talk about benefit, let's consider also the knowledge. The fact that I'm sitting here and today I'm Dr. Maluleke is because of the knowledge I acquired through the time. Thirdly, is that as a community, Yagamakuleke, we denied to be involved in our own rights. But we took a stance of involving ourselves. Right. So there's a difference between getting involved or involving the community. We said we didn't want to be involved, but we wanted to involve ourselves in the industry. Because we realized that there's no benefit of involving community rather than community involving themselves.
Good, okay, thank you very much. And we are going to have to move on, so give this panel a round of applause. You've got a taster, they're at the lab, you can talk to them. Thank you very much.